Hi, this is Darren at Chenard's. We're here in the garden today and we're going to look at harvesting onions here in the first week of July. So you can see my onions have shouldered up out of the soil, and that's perfectly normal. In fact, that's a great thing because there's a pretty good risk of rot if you have soil clear up around the neck of the onions. We know they're ready to harvest because they're well sized. We're seeing a fair amount of low leaf yellowing, and some of them have begun to actually soften the necks and bend over, a sure sign of them being finished for the season. You might note that we stopped irrigating the patch of onions about 2 weeks ago preparatory to harvest. This will enable them to paper up, as you can see the brown paper forming on the outside, will help them cure for long-term storage. Onions harvest very simply when they're shouldered up and in a light, well-based soil. We'll simply pull right out of the soil. When you have your onions harvested, try not to overhandle them or prep them for long-term storage right away. Just leave them like this in a shady, warm, and dry location and let them cure for about 2 or 3 weeks. After curing, you can trim off the root masses, trim off the tops, and prepare them for longer-term storage. Sometimes your soil might be heavier, especially if you're in a native soil rather than a raised area. In such cases, it's a very good idea to use a fork to come in from the outside of the row, push down, and lift up just enough to get some lift or separation. Onion roots are very small. It doesn't take much to get them readily available to harvest out. And from there, the harvesting should go smooth and rapidly. Notice that some of the onions have developed a flower head. We want to make sure as we finish the curing and cleanup process on these that we put these onions aside to use more rapidly. Onions that don't have any flower head will store well. Onions that have a flower head, there's going to be a little hollow down through the center of the onion, and that can dramatically impact their storage life. It's not a disaster, especially when it happens very late in the season like this, but it will limit the storability. So set aside the flowered onions for quicker use. So these are Patterson storage onions, and so they should have a good long storage life. Sweet onions don't hold as long, though they'll hold for many weeks after harvest, just not months and months and months. We could, if we wanted, leave a batch of these in the ground, harvest some, leave the rest. The tops will continue to die down and yellow, and eventually you'll have just the onion itself pushed up out of the soil, and that's okay. It's certainly an option. The reason I like to harvest out completely is I want this space. I want to plant some fall crops behind these onions, and having the onions in the soil, they would need to be not watered for that entire period to not rot or take other damage.